franchise of the canonical Christ, created at the Council of Nicaea, did not tolerate the Christ of the early Christians, which was widespread in the first centuries of our era. The thought of the non-canonical Christ, as revealed in the apocryphal Gospels, such as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, among other texts found in Nag Hammadi, differs profoundly from the Christ of the traditional biblical canon. These writings affirmed that temples and priests were not needed to approach God. These beliefs were unacceptable to the Empire of Constantinople, as they would leave the clergy of the time without work. This more natural Christ desired that we search for him within ourselves, in a reflective, liberating, and profoundly antidogmatic way. Below, I summarize the most important characteristics of the natural Christ. The non-canonical Christ does not come to found a religion or to save through sacrifice, but to awaken human beings from forgetting their divine origin. His central message is, know yourself and you will be saved. Christ guides the soul toward liberating self-knowledge, not toward obedience out of fear. He says in the Gospel of Thomas, "The kingdom is within you and without you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known and you will realize that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, you are plunged in poverty and you are poverty itself." This is interesting, because being plunged in poverty of being is the consequence of suffering from ontopenia, the sickness of being. We have said that the soul is constructed. We were born from a seed that grew, and through biological ontogeny, it formed our body. Just as our body was born, so is the germ of the soul born, a very small seed that is our being. It waits to germinate and develop, to be cultivated. And if in the end we do not develop it, then it will be as if we had no soul. In Matthew 13 verses 31 to 32, the parable teaches that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Although it begins small and insignificant, it can grow and become something great and powerful. For that is precisely what our soul is. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, "My soul grieved for the sons of men, because they are blind in their hearts and do not realize that they came empty into the world, and empty again they try to leave it." If we are born with nothing, we must build our soul or being. Otherwise, we will leave with an empty spirit. And it also says, in the same Gospel of Thomas, that it is a wonder of wonders that the spirit has come into being thanks to the body. Who marvels at how this great wealth of the soul has developed in the poverty that is the body. We must accept that very few will be saved, because there are many empty souls. Simply put, those seeds did not develop, and the individual preferred to remain in his animal nature. He never ceased to be a drone of the collective, never abandoned the purposes of the genius of the species to create his own. In the texts not accepted by Constantine's empire, that is, the Apocrypha, the natural Christ does not play the role of scapegoat. He does not die to pay for sins, but rather teaches how to transcend the material world and its deceptions. The natural Christ never dared to commit the greatest of sins, which is, to forgive sins. Salvation, in this way, is not a single act of faith or a free gift, but a process of purification, revelation, and evolution. Christ acts as the soul's guide, psychopomp, helping it traverse the planes of desire, ignorance, anger, etc. Our conclusions and those of the apocryphal Gospels about the natural Christ find their greatest parallel in the idea that salvation is not external or imposed from outside, but is achieved through inner knowledge. This aligns with other mystical and philosophical traditions that also affirm that knowing oneself is the most important aspect of the human experience. For Socrates, self-knowledge was the starting point of all wisdom. Not knowing one's limits, desires, or ignorance was the greatest danger. His central maxim was know thyself. Nthi soten. With Pythagoras, self-knowledge was a form of spiritual hygiene and was cultivated through silence, contemplation, and harmonious study of the cosmos and the soul. Heraclitus valued inner knowledge above conventional wisdom. He said, "Explore yourself." The phrase edesissimin emioiton in ancient Greek means I investigated myself or I searched for myself. We could say that Heraclitus was the first to recommend becoming an egonaut. For Heraclitus, the soul that does not know itself lives like a sleepwalker, disconnected from the flow of the world. Epicurus, although he does not speak of self-knowledge in metaphysical terms like Plato, advocates the knowledge of one's desires, fears, and limits as a way to achieve ataraxia, tranquility of the soul. He said that knowing oneself allows one to eliminate the fear of death and unnecessary pain. Many other thinkers on human existence were concerned with self-knowledge, such as Plato, Zeno, Epictetus, Seneca, etc. With the rise of modernity, the idea that knowing oneself is fundamental remained alive and took on new forms with many other philosophers. Constantine's empire wasn't interested in the spiritual growth of its community. It wanted to generate wealth and power. To achieve this, the Catholic franchise needed to build temples, and a single canonical Jesus was imposed by blood and fire. The useful one, and the domesticated one. Then Rome arrived with its obsession with order, unity, and ideological control. Rome didn't find Jesus, it manufactured him. It didn't select the most spiritual version, but the one most useful to its project. It was clear that it wanted to unify religions and eliminate heresies, which basically meant discarding everything that opposed its goals. This is how the canonical Jesus preached today was manufactured, not the natural and mystical Christ. In the Gospel of Thomas, we read, in Logion 77, Jesus says, "I am the light that overshadows all. I am the all came forth from me, and the all returned to me. Split a log, and I am there. Lift a stone, and you will find me there." This phrase denies the need for an exclusive temple. The sacred is everywhere, in the simple, in the natural, even in the common. Here, the message is clear. The temple is within us, in self-knowledge, not in an external institution. The apocryphal Gospels maintain that God or the kingdom is not confined to temples. Inner knowledge replaces external ritual. The human soul is the true sanctuary. In short, temples are not necessary according to these texts. The sacred dwells within the human being, not in buildings or religious structures. And this, for the empire of Constantine, was unacceptable. Fortunately, for the early Christians, they had writings that warned of ontological dangers. It is important to note that the apocryphal Gospel of Mary Magdalene is special because it warns of the 7 ontic dangers, except for ignoring reality or living in fantasy, or having a model of the world that is as real as possible without being contaminated by fallacies. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, he conveys Jesus' teachings about the liberation of the soul and its ascent after death. It recounts the soul's journey through the 7 powers or 7 faculties, which can be interpreted as internal obstacles or passions that chain the soul to the material world. However, these 7 obstacles would have the same meaning as ontic dangers. Dangers that prevent us from reaching our fullness of being or pleroma. The word pleroma comes from the Greek, which means fullness. Fullness of being is not a gift. It is constituted by pure merit, a product of one's own exploration and work. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, each power represents a negative force, a passion, or a bond that the soul must transcend. Mary describes the characteristics of these powers. Here are the 7 powers she speaks of. 1. Darkness, and 3. Ignorance. Represents ignorance, the lack of knowledge of spiritual truth. Darkness blinds the soul and keeps it bound to the material world. Ignorance as a denial of inner knowledge, a denial of all that we can be, or the pleroma of being, the total realization of being. It is the ontic danger of being prevented from knowing oneself and the world. 2. Desire, and 5. The kingdom of the flesh, or desire of the body. This existential danger represents the soul's subjection to the physical body and its impulses. It is the attachment to bodily existence. It refers to the attraction to material pleasures and worldly desires. A well-built soul is no longer driven by desire, which is a great ontic danger. What is the greatest human desire in the collective? Gratification, self-satisfaction, cultural onanism, the constant pressing of the hedonistic onanic button. And the attraction to this desire is such that an onanistic culture has recently emerged, where all its practices are considered politically correct, which distances them from the pleroma of being and sickens them in ontopenia. 4. Anger, and 7. The wrath of the flesh, or the evil of the flesh. When desire or attachment is not fulfilled, the drone rages. This emotion is ontic destruction, as it clouds reason and disrupts inner harmony. 6. The madness of earthly desire, or the deceitful wisdom of the flesh. This refers to a false wisdom based on the worldly, on the sensual. It is the confusion of the true with the illusory. One could also say that it is the attachment to the way of existing of having, which is contrary to the way of being. Within the interpretation of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, these powers are passions or internal structures that keep the soul in exile from its true home, the Pleroma, fullness. It maintains a cacophonous vibration, far from being in tune with the utopus. But these ontic dangers are not faced in death, as she claims in her mythology. For if one dies without a soul, one no longer faces any kind of danger. The true danger is dying without a soul, or with a reduced soul, a junk soul, in the minimal expression of existence, a soul sick with ontopenia. But the soul must confront these ontic dangers in life, and it avoids and combats them with wisdom. And by overcoming them, it builds itself correctly. In addition, there are other fearful ontic dangers, such as not accepting reality. And interestingly, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, this is not one of the 7 dangers to overcome, but it does mention, somewhere in the document, that committing adultery is the only thing properly called sin. What is the sin of the world? According to her, the Savior answered, "There is no sin per se, but it is you yourselves who make something sinful when you perform acts that participate in adulteration, which is the only thing properly called sin. Because adulteration is falsifying, altering the nature of something. That is why he came among you to purify all nature in order to restore it to its original state. For if an individual thinks he is a dolphin, he is denying his nature, even if this is considered politically correct. To save themselves, the individual must accept reality. They must know themselves, not live in fantasies. They must search for themselves. They have no choice but to be an explorer of their own being, that is, an egonaut." There is a very important phrase that appears in the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus said, "Become passengers." Gospel of Thomas, Logion 42. This is one of the shortest and most dense sentences in the text, and also one of the most powerful in spiritual and philosophical terms. To be a passenger. This phrase suggests that we should live in the world without being of the world. To be a passenger is to have no attachment to material things, to the ego, or to the dominant value system, because one becomes what one loves. And if you love having, being disappears. To be a passenger is to not identify with what is transitory, illusory, or what perishes. In our case, we discover that the soul is built in the shipyard of the brain, and in death the boat is launched to make the final journey. We are passing through, and in death we begin the journey with our true selves. As John said 17:16, "We are in the world, but we are not of the world." In Stoicism, the wise man is a citizen of the cosmos, without attachment to a fixed place. In Buddhism, life is impermanent. Detachment is the path to wisdom. And in the Gospel of Thomas, it doesn't simply say, "You are passengers," but "become passengers." Because becoming passengers implies a voluntary action, a spiritual practice, which is to build the soul, although they don't use this language. Embrace reality, because only in reality can we change, not in mythologies or fantasies, nor adopt roles alien to our person. Don't wear masks, as if we were other people. The disguises can be very high-end, made of cloth, plastic, or surgeries to alter the body's soma. Everything we write is a soteriology for the consciousness of transit. There is no room for foolish accumulation, for the culture of having. The phrase "become passengers" can also be understood as a critique of stagnation, of existential rigidity. Don't become dependent on models, don't worship them, for every doctrine is merely a tool, or map, for navigating the world. The traveler uses real maps, or if there aren't any, explores and creates his own. Das Man usually gives his map of the world, but we need the most faithful and realistic model of the world possible. The saying from the Gospel of Thomas, "Become passengers," is one of those pearls of wisdom whose brevity conceals an ontological depth. If we read it through the lens of Martin Heidegger's thought, we find a surprising resonance. The call to become a passenger in the world can be understood as an exhortation to live an authentic existence. That is, a life that is not confused with what is given, what is trivial, or what is imposed by the authority of the horde. For Heidegger, the human being is not a substance, nor a thing among things, but an opening of being, a Dasein, being there, that understands itself in time, projecting itself toward possibilities. And, let's say, building a soul. Being a passenger, then, means living in the world in order to be more. What is most revealing is that, with Heidegger, being a passenger would be being toward death. We show that, in the soteriology of the canonical Christ, instead of saving, he keeps diminished and sick souls in ontopenia. In the minimal expression of being, the canonical Christ creates the inauthentic Heideggerian being, keeping it a drone that swarms in the collective. Meanwhile, the natural Christ advises that the best thing we can do to save ourselves is to know ourselves, and even, as we mentioned before, warns us of some ontic dangers. Something very interesting that the apocryphal writings describe is that Christ only recognizes those who have reached the center of their soul, and, therefore, are similar to him. In the passage, Logion 3, it says, "The kingdom is within you and without you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will know that you are children of the living Father." This is a profound reflection with strong theological and philosophical resonance. The phrase, "I do not know you," appears in Matthew 7 verses 21 to 23. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and perform many mighty works in your name?' Then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Or in Luke 13 verse 27. Jesus explains what it takes to be saved. He points out that only those who know him can spend eternity with him, but he has different standards for that knowledge than the culture. Here he mentions two typical ways that culture would define a deep personal knowledge. What does know mean in the context of Christ? In biblical thought, especially in New Testament Greek, know is an intimate, relational, existential knowledge. When Christ says, "I do not know you," he is not speaking of factual ignorance, but of not being in communion, in oneness of being with that person. That person has not grown to resonate with a Christ-like frequency. It's like placing a tuning fork with a note A, 440 Hz, next to another tuning fork with a 440 Hz pitch. Both will vibrate by resonance because they are built at the same frequency. But a 440 Hz tuning fork will never resonate with another tuning fork, say 261.6 Hz, which is the note C. It simply doesn't recognize it. It doesn't tune into it. Because the Gospel of Thomas says, "The kingdom is within you and without you," Logion 3. From this perspective, it is not enough to perform external works if they do not spring from a transformed being, from authentic contact within a truth. This is why Christ said, "Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you.'" Are they saved because Christ knows them? Here there is a tension between two soteriological models. The legalistic moralistic model of the canonical Christ. One is saved by keeping commandments, doing good works, avoiding sin, even though the individual is mired in self-ignorance. Relational ontological model of the natural Christ. One is saved because, by evolving and knowing oneself, one has been recognized by Christ. That is, one has been reintegrated into the truth of being, one has responded to the inner call. From the second model, more mystical and existential, salvation is not about complying with the bureaucratic procedures of the franchise invented at the Council of Nicaea, but rather the response to the recognition of the divine within oneself. Christ knows those who have built a soul, and if their soul is well built, it will resemble the image of Jesus. And those who have lived alienated from the canonical Christ, even if they have performed external good works, do not know him, because there is no ontological communion. Works, in this view, are not the cause of salvation, but rather its addition. They are fruits of an inner transformation. As it is said of the tree, "By their fruits you will know them." It is not about doing in order to be, but rather being, in order to then do from that truth. Christ says, "I do not know you," not because of a lack of works, but because of a lack of communion in being. He only recognizes those who resonate with him. Inner knowledge is the path to that communion. That's where Jesus dwells because they have a similar ontic signature. Works don't save. What saves is being recognized by Christ, that is, being tuned into a similar ontic frequency. What do we need to be saved? Only to be sincere and honest. Not to deceive ourselves and be like we were when we were children, undirected by the genius of the species with its hedonistic and onanic tricks. Salvation, then, is a question of ontological identity.